Welcome, everyone. My name is Elise Bryson, and I am the founder of the Sober Curator. And today we are having a Sober Curator Friendsgiving, which is perfect because, as we know, November is Gratitude Month, and one of our favorite friends, Matthew Perry's memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, came out on November 1st. Right around that time, he also had his interview with Diane Sawyer. So we're going to be talking about all that and more today. But I would like to go around the Zoom room and let everybody introduce themselves. And let's start with the holiday armadillo.
Well, other than being an armadillo, my name's Tamar Medford, and I'm host of the Now What Society podcast, or co-host. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love Friends. I missed the show. I remember a few years back binging on it all over again. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
I can't take you serious in that hat.
Why? I can't. I'm just an armadillo doing what armadillos do.
Right?
Yeah.
Lane, over to you.
My name is Lane Kennedy, and I am the other host of the Now What Society podcast. Also love being a sober curator and excited about this conversation. Excited about talking about Matthew Perry. Yeah.
Now, Lane, I'm just going to ask right off the bat, because I know that you have had living in California and the lifestyle that you have had, you have run into and met lots of celebrities over your very short life as a young lady. So have you ever met Matthew Perry?
I have been at the table with him.
Oh, gosh, you guys, we are amongst.
I have. Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, we will hear more on that soon. Megan, who is channeling Jennifer Anderson this morning.
Hello, my name is Megan Swan. I love being a sober curator as well. I'm a wellness coach and consultant. I have a podcast called Energetically You. And yeah, I'm so excited for this conversation. I grew up with Friends, and interestingly, it's one of very few shows that my husband and I, particularly in the early years when we barely spoke each other's languages, would agree on. And it's what I watched while I was in labor with both kids in those earlier hours where it was just killing time. And yeah, I was really moved by this book, and looking forward to this conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Miss Chenandler Bong.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lamo, career happiness coach and sober curator. Really excited to be here today. I'm channeling Ms. Chenandler Bong from the TV guide from Friends. Really excited to be here. Loved the book, loved the interview. I definitely grew up on Friends. I mentioned to my sister yesterday, I'm like, what should I show up as for this? And she went straight into Miss Chenandler Bong. Like, it still makes us laugh all the time. Like, we have so many quotes that we just say all the time because of Friends. Didn't even realize what a big influence it was on our lives.
And I just want to let you ladies know that I had the joy of doing a recording with Sarah the other night on another Sober Curators podcast, Amy Liz Harrison, who cannot be here today, but is bummed about it. But with her 8 children, she usually has a sporting activity that she has to attend on Saturdays. And I'm going to let you guys know right now, Sarah is a shark when it comes to Friends trivia. She got all the answers right when we played the other day. And I asked some questions that honestly, no one should know that level of detail. And Sarah did. So I am just saying that, number one, to be like, the challenge has been thrown down. And number two, I also claim Sarah as a partner for any future trivia competitions. And then Ashley, over to you.
Hello, I'm Ashley Sunderland, and being a part of the Sober Curator is one of my favorite parts about being in recovery. I love all of you guys, and I'm happy to be here this morning. I am a licensed drug and alcohol counselor in the Twin Cities, and also a certified prevention professional and author of the Sober Sweat fitness and nutrition lifestyle blog.
Woohoo! All right, I am just going to read a little blurb about Matthew's book, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. The beloved star of Friends takes us behind the scenes of the hit sitcom and his struggles with addiction in this candid, darkly funny, poignant memoir. This is a most anticipated book, and I know I had it saved in my cart on Amazon for a couple of months at least. Here is a short little excerpt. Hi, my name is Matthew, although you may know me by another name. My friends call me Maddie, and I should be dead. So begins the riveting story of acclaimed actor Matthew Perry taking us along on his journey from childhood ambition to fame to addiction and recovery in the aftermath of a life-threatening health scare. Before the frequent hospital visits and stints in rehab, there was 5-year-old Matthew who traveled from Montreal to Los Angeles, shuffling between his separated parents, 14-year-old Matthew, who was a nationally ranked tennis star in Canada, 24-year-old Matthew, who nabbed a coveted role as a lead cast member on the talked about pilot, then called Friends Like Us, and so much more. In an extraordinary story that only he could tell, and in the heartfelt, hilarious, and warmly familiar way only he could tell it, Matthew Perry lays bare the fractured family that raised him and also left him to his own devices, the desire for recognition that drove him to fame, and the void inside him that could not be filled even by his greatest dreams coming true. But he also details the peace he's found in sobriety and how he feels about the ubiquity of Friends, sharing stories about his castmates and other stars he met along the way. Frank, self-aware, and with his trademark humor, Perry vividly depicts his lifelong battle with addiction and what fueled its despite seemingly and what fueled it despite, I can't read today, seemingly have it all. Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing is an unforgettable memoir that is both intimate and eye-opening, as well as a hand extended to anyone struggling with sobriety. Unflinchingly honest, moving, and uproariously funny, this is the book that fans have been waiting for. So, that being said, do we want to start talking about the book? Do we want to start talking about the Diane Sawyer interview? I actually watched the interview before I cracked the book open. Did anybody else do it in a different order? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen the whole interview, only the clips that I could get on. So I did the book first, and I think I'm glad I did, but I'm sure it's just more informative either way.
Yeah. And did everybody listen to it on Audible, or did we actually read it out of the book?
Listen to it
on Audible. Yeah.
Yeah,
And to
yeah.
hear it in his voice, it makes such a big difference. And I'm glad I did.
Such a big voice. Can we start by talking about his voice and how it's kind of different now, right?
totally fucked up.
Yeah.
Let's just
And
call
that's,
it out.
I mean, yeah, and that is what living in long-term addiction does to your body. And as we know, and we got into his story, a lot of things happened to his body due to the excessiveness of the drinking and the drugs, but his voice is definitely one of them. And for me, when I would hear his voice, both in the interview with Diane Sawyer as well as on Audible, it didn't seem like that far of a stretch to think about what his voice sounds like when he's super inebriated and out of it, and like wandering around his Hollywood Hills mansion overlooking the beach, slurring to himself or to his bestie Aaron that apparently never leaves his side. So it wasn't hard for me to imagine what he probably sounds like when he's really effed up.
Yeah, it makes you think like what, like the whole character on Friends, for example, was kind of high like, the whole time. So it's
Yeah.
like a whole other level of character. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
that was
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the ebbs and flows of his addiction on the show Friends. Between, I think he talked about like when he was heavier, he was deep into the alcoholism, and when he was skinnier, he was deep into the pills, and that many times he was being shuttled back and forth from sober living or with a sober companion, or even at a treatment center to film. What did you guys think about that?
It was
Normal.
really surprising to hear about that, considering I watched the show long before I was deep in my addiction. And then in the interview with Diane Sawyer, when they were kind of going back through and he was pointing out hard times, happy times, those sorts of things, you can see things so differently now.
Well, and you can see how like pale he is, right? When he's in his pill addiction. And I can relate to that because there was times where I was super heavy and then thin because I was using harder drugs. And so just to watch him go through, you knew something was going on. You just didn't know how bad it was. Like when I heard how many pills a day he was taking, I almost went into shock. I'm like, how does somebody even get that many pills per day? Like it was 50 something, I think, per day that he
55.
took. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, shame on the people that were catering to him for that.
Right.
Like shame on them for sure.
Yeah.
Lane, you look like you have something to say.
Well, it's interesting because I got sober in Los Angeles, right, where celebrity sobriety is challenging. It's like really. I'm surprised that he's alive. Honestly, we've lost a lot of people through addiction because of fame, and when he made that deal with God, right, like he got that deal, and his life was taken from him. And I think that's something to like really like drugs and alcohol drove him in everything. And even in this book, it's still driving him. He may not be aware of it. He is not aware of it at all, but it's still driving him.
What do you mean by that?
Megan
I
has something.
totally agree. That was one of the things that really stuck out to me, that I feel he's, it's so much a part of his identity.
Yeah.
Even in the book, even though we go through the, like that he is explaining a certain counselor that pointed out sort of the obvious to everybody else, and that, at some point he kind of accepted it. It still feels like even this book, he's just really can't imagine himself without that story. And I don't think it needs to be like completely detached, but I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next 20 years, let's just say.
Yeah. It's like, this is a great first step, right? That's what he just did. Like he wrote it out. Now he's sharing about it. I wonder what his bank account looks like. Like, what is he doing? Because when you live at that pace and have that kind of wealth, to be like keeping up with it destroys you from the inside out. It just does. If you're not in that spotlight. So that's why I say, Ashley, that it's still driving him.
Yeah. Okay. And I see that too. I saw some other heard some other interesting things that he said in his interview, and I thought, but no judgment. I just
like what?
Well, when I think it was towards the end, he was saying, I know this will help others. And I believe that, but just, I think words have a lot of power, and I myself try to be very careful about what I say. And especially when I'm in my role as a counselor, I speak from my own perspective. a lot, which I am grateful I can do for the company I work for. Not all counselors can talk about their own story like I can, but I suppose it concerned me because I was just thinking, well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will help other people, and maybe that's, you know, a big part of the reason why he's doing this, but we can't know anything. I don't know. And you know, he was just, maybe I'm putting more thought into it than necessary, but you know, I guess sort of praying, like the prayer meditation or the intention that it will help people is more what I was thinking he could have said, but I don't know.
Also, his timeline was really messed up. Can we talk about the timeline? Because when I was getting sober, he was there, right? So like I watched him walk into the room, and then all of a sudden he's not sober. So like, as I was listening to him kind of unfold his story, I was like, no, dude, that's not when it happened. Like in my mind, I'm having struggle with his timeline. I don't know if anybody else had struggle with it.
The timeline was really hard to follow on Audible, so I'm going to imagine it was just as hard in the book, which I also have. Like, I have both. I had a hard time following his timeline because I was like, wait a minute, you just said you were 47, but now you're talking about something that is very clearly when you were in your early 30s. Like, it jumped around a lot. That stood out to me. The other thing I want to talk about is his use of words made it beyond clear to me that he has spent 6,000 hours sitting in church basements, and that he does know the words of the big book Alcoholics Anonymous inside and out. But sitting in church basements and knowing the words of a textbook does not mean that you're actively practicing and fully working the 12 steps. And he did reference Alcoholics Anonymous a lot throughout the book in a pretty favorable way, which I appreciated. But you know, he has so much relapse in his story. Lane, I can see you thinking. I'm curious what you thought about that.
I'm thinking.
I can see you thinking. I can see it.
Those were thoughts there. Well, you know, there is a lot of time spent listening, taking it in, right? But there's a difference between listening and practicing.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was probably practicing at half speed. Or, you know, for me, I know that I have to be practicing fully 100% of the time. And again, I just compare like the difference in lifestyle and the difference in drive and what's important, right? What was important to him was to, you know, fuck every girl in LA. Like he was like on the move, right? Like he wanted to just get whoever he could. And it's like, if you're not working a program or you're not being spiritual, you're not just filling that up, eventually, and he did every time, right? He had that long stint of 2 years and then he grabbed the pills and he didn't even know why. And
just one a day,
so right. Like he was like, I don't understand what happened. There I was again. Right. So if you know, people are not invested in some kind of spiritual, emotional wellness program for their recovery, they will drink again. And for Matthew, his addiction ran so deep. You know, if you go back to his childhood, right? Go back to when he was a baby going on to barbiturates right off the bat, like neurochemically, right into his brain, that sets him up for a different experience as he aged. So he was like conditioned to just go down the rabbit hole, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Without having read the book and just listened to the interview, I plan to listen to it on Audible. In the interview, he says, helping others became the answer for me. And so I wondered about that part, right? Because as part of the 12 steps, that's the part that keeps, it says in the big book that this will keep you sober, is helping others. And I wondered how much, what does that look like for him? He didn't go into detail about that in the interview. Maybe he does in the book, but I also like that he talked about AA and therapy and sober living. I think those are important pieces that he mentioned. But yeah, is he practicing the spiritual principles in all his affairs?
I don't know that we get that from the interview or the book. Doesn't mean he's not. I just don't know that we get that from what's been shared. Megan?
Yeah, well, I think he touches on like gratitude, but it's unclear like if that's a practice or just, something he's adopted as a mindset potentially. But some points that really stood out for me, like one, back to the timeline, it's unclear as of the writing of the book how long he's been sober. And, like the latest reference that I remember is the smoking thing in January of 2022, like this year. So there's that it's just unclear the timeline, but I mean, maybe with that kind of level of addiction, it's just unclear to him as well. I mean, I don't know. But I, like a lot of you, did the AA path, and so maybe you were more familiar of this gentleman that he like partnered with. I like did a deep dive and Googled him and learned a lot of interesting things. But I thought that chapter was pretty interesting, and him really pulling out that individual still owes him 100% of the money that was invested. It's like, well, you went into business with someone, like at some, like if the business failed, I don't know. It was unclear what that relationship was, why it failed. And that, actually goes back to him, channeling a lot of energy into helping other people by turning his home into this sober living center. And I think at that point, like, was there like a 10-year, because he said that he was working with that individual and friends with that individual for 10 years. So does that mean he had like a 10-year stint of sobriety?
He didn't, though.
Like a long time.
No.
Yeah,
No.
no.
Lane, do you know that man, Earl Hightower?
I do. And I'm going to say it was on Matthew. Like that something went sideways with Matthew. But again, I'm not there anymore. I know Earl he's all about serving and helping, and I have nothing to say.
Yeah. What struck me is, and I while I am not a celebrity, nor do I desire to be one, nor will I ever be one, I have had some close proximity to celebrities in the Pacific Northwest that are in recovery, and I have seen how they get treated differently and the access. And one of the descriptions that Matthew used more than once, because it really spoke to me, is when he references the vodka bottle, the one with the handle. Because
Yes.
that's the big one.
That's the one in my freezer.
That's the one I was buying, right?
Yeah.
'Cause and I would go and I would buy a couple at a time, and people would be like, "Oh, you having a party?" I'm like, "Yes, I am. Me, myself, and I." But like, I wouldn't have stopped if I had someone cleaning up my consequences and unlimited access to funds. No fucking way would I have stopped. No way would I have
The money,
stopped.
the money thing is a huge part in this situation.
Huge part.
And
Huge
that's why
part.
I'm super questionable about the book and the push for his kind of presence again in society. Oh, I want to help people. Like, and I love Matthew Perry. Come on, he wants to get sober, but I'm like, dude, why are you doing this now? Like,
He's
is
out of
there
money.
an ulterior motive, right? Self-seeking.
No, I thought like maybe it's even, coordinated with the Friends like who knows? Like
Yeah,
I didn't think there was.
I don't know, but it will bite him in the ass, right? It's promised that. So I'm like, can we just, Matthew, please. No.
Yeah, I really felt like he was still in it. Like like he's still living that lifestyle. That's what I felt. To me, it didn't come from somebody who's clean and sober, right? And also there's one thing to quote stuff in the big book. I mean, people can do that all day long, but it's another thing to actually share from the heart. Right. And that's something that I learned because I was like, I got to say the lingo. I got to make sure I sound right. Well, no, it's about sharing what's in your heart. So yeah, I really, I'm only partway through the book, but as reading it, I just feel like he's still so in it.
Well, I mean, for sure he's in early recovery. And we all, I think at some point have talked about how we define early recovery. And most of us define early recovery as 0 to 6 years. It's like when you're
10.
like a baby. And that's me being generous, Lane. I know 10 is your number, right? But I'm trying to be a little bit generous because a lot of people don't get past that 5-year mark. Like they just don't. You know why? Because it's fucking hard.
It's fucking
hard.
It is.
Yeah,
Almost there. Almost
months.
there.
Is that what we heard? 18 months? Is that how much he has? Or
I think
It was
I think
unclear.
it's unclear, but
Yeah.
if you take it back to when he filmed the Friends special that supposedly he was sober for, but had just had all the work done on his teeth, that was like what, about 18 months ago, right? So somewhere in there. Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Well, and
I
to your point,
didn't go
Tamara,
up and down at that point either. I wouldn't have been writing any books about how to do it.
It's almost risky even to write a book about your story that early in recovery, unless you have the
Well,
support.
you know what else I kind of like, who's his business management team? What are their motives? Like, he's brought up money in his, in the book, right? So where did it all go? Yeah, probably in his body, up his nose, parties, girls, hookers, right? The whole thing. But, when you are at that level and you have a sober companion and you have the staff around you, it is hard to live any kind of normalcy. And he paints that picture so beautifully of like sitting up and looking down upon everybody, right? Looking down. And he says that quite a few times. And and having Aaron next to him in the bedroom, in the sober house, right? Like all of these things that it's like for him to feel safe. He talks about being safe, feeling safe, feeling safe. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like I was wanted or needed. But we don't get that by external. We get that from an internal observation, an internal excavation of our soul. And that's where he's like, is he there right now? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, maybe he's like scratching the surface, and that's what a first step is all about. And that's what he just gave us. So when is he going to get to steps 2 through 12? Right. And he talks about service. I'm of service. I'm sharing my story. But again, to Megan's point, or maybe it was Ashley, of like, what's going to happen over the next 5 years for him?
Well, and I wondered if writing this book isn't like an insurance for him. Like if I put this out there, then I really got to do this deal because I put it in black and white and I put it in a book. And I did all the book tours and I did all the things. So this is going to somehow magically protect me from that next relapse, except we all know it's not, right?
But didn't they do that? Like, didn't he come out like, I'm sober on People magazine, and then he had the crash and burn on People magazine, right? So he's been this really super public person around his recovery. So I don't know. I don't think the book is like this.
Before we hopped in this call, I was like looking for other interviews, and he was on Letterman promoting Saving Sarah. No, what is it called? And
Saving Sarah.
So did that movie come out? Because I understood from the book that it never came out, and like it was a whole like legal battle.
Oh,
and anyway, apparently Elizabeth Hurley's.
Yeah, I think it came out.
Okay, so anyway, at that point, he was like very publicly talking, and I think it was even a year plus that he'd been sober before he was doing that interview on Letterman, and he did look like, in a good place. But I think to Tamara's point, it's like, that's what I mean by I feel like it's still so part of his identity. Like he's just at the point where he's still kind of romanticizing, like he hasn't found what's going to replace all the things that he got from, the fun, the the drama, he hasn't found the thing that's feeding his soul in the same way. Obviously, like that doesn't really feed your soul, but that's a narrative that we're fed, right? And I feel like, yeah, it's maybe it's more set in stone in his mind if it's public
Like-
at this level, but it just doesn't feel like he's secure in it. He still misses that on some level, even though he sees like how wrong and sick and dangerous it is for himself.
I didn't hear a whole lot of humility, I think, is maybe what I was listening for in the interview.
Mm.
Well, and I kept telling my husband all these stories because he's like a huge Friends fan and he never listened to it. But do you think he got permission from all these people with all these stories, like Gwyneth Paltrow in a closet, and like his opinion of Kenny Reeves? I don't know. There's like, generally he was very kind and flowery about all of the women, but there were like certain one-liners where do people sign off on these being in this book, or is it just like exploding as we speak?
Again, intentional, right? He has intention with what he wrote in this book. And if he could sit across from me, he'd be like, no, I didn't, Lane. I'm like, well, again, jury's out for the next 5 years. Let me see.
Right. More will be revealed.
More will be revealed.
I need to know, my parents have been married for 50 years. So I don't know what it's like to come from a divorced home, which means I definitely don't know what it was like to fly by myself as an unaccompanied minor. Did anyone here have that experience?
Yes.
Yeah, my parents were divorced when I was 7. So by the time I was 10, we were doing that once or twice a year. Granted, I was with my brother, who's 3 years younger. And we thought it was great. Like, you got to sit in first class and they like treated you like little kings and queens. And, I didn't look at it the same way, but I immediately, upon listening, I think it's the first chapter, like being Canadian, I did not know the depths of the Canadian history there. So I found that fascinating. But then also one of my best friend who's been, she's sober 11 years now, and her story is very similar in that she grew up around wealth and powerful parents. But they were quite blunt that she was not planned, she was not really wanted, and she was shipped off to boarding schools and like spent a lot of time with nannies and or alone, or being like the entertaining kid at adult parties. And so I mean, I think he definitely had a lot of, and I think that one of the really important points is that he learned how to drink from his dad.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was a huge piece.
Is his dad sober?
Yeah, his dad went to one program and never drank again because his wife at the time said it was like me or the booze. And he specifically teases that out as like, I had a different level of addiction, and that it's 15 plus times that I've gone to some sort of program. And
there is something about this being coming from a divorced family, living in isolation. Again, it just goes to this. His mom put barbiturates into him because the doctors at the time said this is a good idea. His body gets set up to be different. He's then not soothed and cuddled and coddled because he's colicky, right? So there's an automatic separation at birth. Like when he comes into the world, he's kind of set up to be like needy in the sense of like he should be, not wanted. I mean, all of that stuff is imprinted on us immediately when we're brought here. So I could say that for myself too. Megan probably have that too, right? Like we all have stuff that we come in the world to, and then we're imprinted more. But are we all going to just drink until we die? Are we going to like, you know what I mean? Like we have choices to make. We have opportunities. We can either stay in that self-pity or make a change. And I'm not, it's like, I sound like I'm like totally just calling him out so much, but it's like, he does have a platform. So we have traditions in place to safeguard. And it's like, he never did that. He was one of the celebrities that came out first and, ranted about his recovery. He never safeguarded what he was being taught. And now this is like 20 years ago, right? So fast forward to today, our times have changed and evolved. And now a lot of people are, not so anonymous, but there is something about that, like being quiet and being soft about your recovery and what's happening. And did his childhood create him or set him up for that? I don't know. Did Megan's? I don't know. Did mine? I don't know. But it's how we choose to live today. Yeah. And
Yeah, I think it goes.
love Matthew Perry. I am a Matthew Perry fan.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I still felt kind of sad for him at the end. Like, I did not feel at the end like, oh, pick me as the. I'd be like,
I want what you have.
But I think the money is a huge factor here, like that you just go so hard, so deep, like and the culture of celebrity, like it's one of, similar to being in, on the road and in the music industry, it's pretty hard pattern to escape because you're, it's just like normalized times 100 as it is in normal society. But there was something else I wanted to add about, but I'll let you know if it comes.
Well, look at Madonna. I'm not going to go there, but like,
Do we have to look at her? I can't. Okay, I can't.
like seriously,
Like seriously, stop.
that,
Whatever you're doing, stop doing that.
Just, oh my God. Yeah.
What's
It's
up
like,
with
it's a
Madonna?
different reality. Wealth does something to people. And I've seen it hundreds of times with people. And it's really,
I know what I want to say. So I really did appreciate him. I mean, I don't think he called out doctors enough in terms of the ones that were allowing him to somehow get that amount. I mean, obviously he went to illegal sources pretty quickly there. I appreciated the raw transparency that he was going to open houses in LA every Sunday and like looking for pills in strangers.
so good.
I mean, that was
honest.
real.
That was
I was
honest.
also like, why didn't I think of that? That
I
was
know,
really
me
smart.
too.
God, so smart.
But I did appreciate he had at least one comment that was very critical in a Matthew Perry sarcastic way of the system and how the recovery centers are so directly tied to modern medicine, and essentially the issue that they bring you in to detox you off one drug to put you on another one, and that the reality of getting yourself off the drug that they put you on in those centers is harder. I think that's a big piece that maybe isn't discussed a lot in the mainstream, and I'm optimistic that might open a lot of conversations.
Does anyone here? I personally don't have a personal experience with Suboxone, but I've worked with women over the years who have been on it, and from everything that the people in my life have told me, and I have read about how hard it is to get off of it, and that's something he really drove home in this book, was the stair stepping down to get off of it because of the withdrawals of it. And be clear, I am pro harm reduction. I am pro anything that keeps you alive. Like, I just full stop, I am. But I'm curious what our thoughts are just on that particular
well, that's more
topic.
medicated assisted therapy, not really harm reduction. I mean, it, at least in my perspective, is that the medicated assisted therapy can be very effective. It can also be abused, and we don't quite know the long-term effects of it, right? Because it hasn't been around that long. So more will be revealed. But my experience living with 11 women in sober living early in recovery was that the girls that were on it were abusing it, and they were sleepwalking at night, eating raw hamburger meat. I mean, that was like my first experience with someone on Suboxone. I hadn't even heard of it until that point in early recovery. But I think it can be helpful. I'm not educated enough to say any more than that, but
Yeah, I know somebody who's going on their 5th year trying to come off of it in recovery, right? And he's had multiple years without it in the past, but it's like harm reduction. There's no reduction anymore. It's just that maintenance, but it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So yeah, I know lots of people who are struggling to come off of it.
So this begs the question, if we're all about harm reduction and, substituting one for another, like, what is the solution here? Like, what do?
we don't have one, I don't think.
Right. So it's like, we've got to come up with something. Something has to shift. Something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think about Matthew, and if he's on 55 pills a day, and he's knowing that he can't give that up. I mean, Matthew's not the only person that's taking 55 pills a day. Right. So if there's somebody else who's listening to this or watching this and they're like, oh, my sister, it's like 55 pills, then we knock it down to 30 pills, and we knock it down to 10. Like, there's got to be some, people that help facilitate this. Ashley, maybe you would be able to talk about that.
Well, I did write down something. One of the main things I took away from the interview was what Jennifer Aniston said in her interview with Diane Sawyer. And that was, I wrote down, we weren't equipped to deal with that, which is, a lot of people aren't. And I wrote down, education and resources need to be taught and accessible to everyone, because everybody will know someone or knows someone or will be affected or is affected by addiction. Yeah. And I mean, but I'm talking about like even in elementary school. I mean, how, prevention, education, and all of those things. I mean, that is so important.
Yeah.
Now more than ever, and moving forward. So,
well, and Lena and I did an interview on the podcast actually a few weeks ago with someone who was a ex-police officer, right? And we talked about the whole crisis right now, and that, we're not telling the truth in schools. Like, we're trying to sugarcoat everything to make it seem lighter. Well, that's not the reality of this disease. Like, it's not a fun, fluffy unicorn disease. Right. And we need to start using the words and stop worrying about offending, like, because this is killing people.
Yeah.
I want to just pause for a moment. And first, can we see the baby sober curator? Is he still here? Because let's just raise him up and show him to the world, because he's
Let
so
me grab
cute.
him as he's getting fussy. Come here.
You got
This is Jack. He is 4 months old.
God.
He's our little baby sober curator.
the cutest. The cutest. I just needed to see those sweet cheeks.
But this is what I think about. Like, Matthew Perry was like this age. I can't imagine giving him drugs. I mean, he's starting to teeth. My husband and I are both in recovery, and we're nervous about how much pain, little medication we give him, because we know that he's prone to our disease.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do want to, one of our sober curators, Annalisa Six, who does the Sober Cast with Six, could not be here today, but as we know from our previous get-togethers, she does star chart readings, and in fact, she has done Matthew Perry's star chart reading, and she has sent us a video. So I am going to play that now.
Hi, Hi, Annalisa here with Lady of Leisure and the Sober Curator, talking about Matthew Perry's birth chart. I'm a little under the weather and I'm unable to make our live chat, so I apologize if I sneeze, cough, have to step away for a second. But I'm just going to do a quick little overview of his chart, and hopefully it'll be fun to kind of review in regard to how his life manifested over the years. I'm going to share my screen, get this birth chart up here. All right, so I kept this simplistic version of the chart just to keep it simple for myself since I'm not feeling good, but normally I include a lot of asteroids and other aspects, but we're just going to talk about the basics. So Matthew Perry was born on August 19th, 1969 in North Adams, Massachusetts at 4:47 a.m. He was born a Leo sun and Leo rising. So he's a double Leo. And his moon is in the sign of Scorpio in his 4th house. So just kind of starting with that, Leo dominant people tend to be, I don't like to say that Leos are extroverted, because depending on where your sun falls, you could be an introverted Leo, you could be an extroverted Leo. But regardless of that, Leo is the sign that represents creativity and self-expression. And so even if you're an introverted Leo, being creative and finding creative ways to express yourself, even if it's private, is incredibly important. However, his placement specifically shows somebody that is a little bit more extroverted and also somebody that's a little bit more self-centered. So when you have your sun in your 1st house, which is the house that represents the self and the identity, your relationship with yourself is really sacred and really important. And it can be sometimes hard for people with a lot of placements in that 1st house and this 1st quadrant to relate to other people in an easy way. This quadrant, all the houses here, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd house, all are self-focused. So if you notice in his chart, he lacks a lot of planetary and celestial placements on the other side. And so if you think about opposites, you know, what's the opposite of the self? The other. And so the opposite side of the chart in those quadrants have a lot to do with other people, our relationships with other people, marriages, shared resources. There's also expanded education and expanded learning versus simplified learning. So there's a lot that can be said about him not only having a sun in the 1st house, but having most of his planetary energies and celestial bodies in that 1st part of the chart. It basically shows somebody that's a little bit more introverted or has a pretty extensive private life or private world and needs to kind of separate from other people and have more of this complex internal relationship with self. But on the flip side, the downside of that can mean that it's sometimes harder for people with these placements to relate to other people. And so they end up feeling like a misfit or feeling like, you know, it's hard to build relationships or connections. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but it's just maybe how that person is feeling. So that's something to kind of note, because I think that one of the things that we see in the interview with Diane Sawyer, and I didn't read his book, so I'm just kind of going off of what I know from the media and that interview, what he shared. You know, he had this very private life, even though he was in front of a camera. And then you think about his family. He had these very public parents, and he also had a very big family, but yet he was kind of the child from the broken home that never quite fit in, right? And so a lot of what he would do is he'd remove himself and go into his own little world. And that's where a lot of his substance abuse would happen, right? So not saying that necessarily people that have a lot of energy in this quadrant leads to substance abuse. That's just true for Matthew Perry, but it does show that he has a need to completely remove himself from others and have some kind of private life or private relationship with himself. The other part of that is that it can come off terribly selfish. So I think it's common for a lot of Leo people specifically, and I'm a Leo, so I feel like I can say this, is not so much that we're self-centered, but we need a lot of time with ourselves to rejuvenate. And so, and in a creative way. So I think that that kind of life that he led separately, you know, isn't surprising to me. The other thing about Leos love to laugh. Leos love to be the funny person. Leos like attention and like external validation from people that they value. I think the misconception with Leo a lot of times is that we all want attention from everybody. That's not true. We want attention from the people or the societies that we value the most. It's not just about everybody. But when you have somebody that's Leo rising, a rising sign is like another sun sign. And so that energy is more extroverted. It's more of like first impression, here's how I'm influencing things. So people that have Leo rising do tend to want more validation from anybody that they're in front of. So I think Chandler's character is a great Leo like energy because it's funny, it's goofy, it's always kind of you know, there. That cast of Friends, a lot of that cast had that type of energy. So I don't know if I would necessarily have guessed that Matthew Perry was a Leo just because it was such a extroverted, lively show. But am I surprised that he's a Leo? And am I surprised that he was kind of the funny guy and that he's double Leo? Not at all. That totally makes sense to me. Another thing that aids in his private life of his addiction, so like him keeping it a secret and kind of, you know, being in this other world, is his Scorpio moon placement in the 4th house. So Scorpio is a very introverted and secretive sign. It likes to be mysterious. It likes to have secrets. It kind of is a gatekeeper when it comes to themselves. And when the moon is in Scorpio, it's considered to be in its fall, which means it's not a comfortable placement for the moon. And so some of the struggles that people with moon in Scorpio have is sometimes they're more prone to jealousy, envy, extreme insecurity, highs and lows. They also can be very secretive and, you know, I don't like generalizing, but a general common theme with some Scorpio dominant people can be to be dishonest. And so in the 4th house is the house that is represented by Cancer. Traditionally, it rules our home and our family and our relationship with our family and our relationship with our home and the family that we build throughout our life. And so having a moon placement, the moon is what we need in life to feel nurtured. It's also how we nurture. It's like kind of what we need to feel safe in the world. And so in the 4th house, we want to be home. We don't want to leave our house. We want to kind of nest away from the rest of society or the rest of the world. And so the fact that he had, you know, not only this desire to kind of covet himself when he needed to refill his cup or rejuvenate, but then it was married with a need for escapism through substances, isn't surprising to me with this combination, because it's not an easy combination. A lot of people that have moons in water signs like Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio can be more prone to alcoholism. The other thing that kind of aids in that signature a little bit is that he also has Neptune in the 4th house, and Neptune also rules alcohol. And so I know he had a pill addiction as well, but alcohol is really dominant in this chart. And so it's not surprising to me. The other thing too with a lot of water dominant people is they can be more prone to opioid addiction. And so the fact that he struggled with that too isn't surprising, just having this specific placement right here. The other thing that I noticed that probably aided in some of his addictive qualities was his Venus in Cancer in the 12th house. So the 12th house is ruled by Pisces traditionally, and Neptune and Jupiter are the rulers of Pisces. So, you know, like I said before, Neptune rules alcohol, Jupiter rules expansion and kind of this never-ending seeking kind of thing. And the 12th house has those themes. It's very it's the other part of reality that's unseen. So the liminal space, the void, and you know, the imaginal realm, it's where our dreams, art, you know, it's all of those ideas, like those types of spiritual connections to the ethereal, all kind of comes through that 12th house. It's also said to be the house that rules where our soul was before we were incarnated. So that first house is that I'm born, and the 12th house is kind of where we came from and what we return to when we're dying. So he has Venus in the 12th house, and Venus has an energy that's all about romance and love and beauty and what we value in ourselves and in others. And it's in Cancer, and Cancer is, again, that 4th house that really enjoys being nurturing and connected to family and connecting in this very kind of homey way. And so Venus a lot of times can be what we need in terms of love in that way. And so when I saw this placement in the 12th house, it's like, oh, like things like alcohol or substances probably felt like home to him in a certain way that felt really good. Like it makes sense why it was so hard for him to quit, because what we're searching for is that feeling that we're connected to the universe. And I think that the thing that happens with a lot of addicts is we get that feeling through substances. You know, we get that feeling through melting away all of our insecurities or our mundane reality, or the things that are monotonous that we don't feel spiritually connected to. And so if Matthew Perry didn't grow up with spirituality, it doesn't surprise me that he was going to end up in a drug addictive state. His North Node, so I always like to talk about the karmic destiny points. His North Node is in Pisces, which, you know, again, is that ruler of the 12th house. And people that are Pisces dominant tend to lean more towards addiction if they don't have a spiritual practice. And so his North Node, the energy that he's supposed to be moving towards is how to connect to this realm in a spiritual way, not necessarily through substances. That's a very like lower vibrational shadow way to connect to that realm, right? Some people will argue that depending on the substance, though, you know, like there's, you know, a lot of people that use plants to still have those experiences. So maybe that would have been more positive for him, you know, to be on a spiritual journey and doing it in a more structured way than in a reckless abandonment kind of way, right? So that's something. He also has Mars in Sagittarius. So like if you've watched any of the 2 previous charts that I've looked at, those people, Elvis and Diane, Princess Diana, they were both Sagittarius dominant people, and Elvis had a lot of Pisces in his chart. I think Princess Diana had a lot of Cancer in her chart. And so again, like Sagittarius in general can also be that sign where there's a need for more constantly, and Mars is action. Like it's wanting to drive things as hard forward as it can. So if you have that need to constantly be fulfilled and you don't know how to do that from within, you're going to look for things outside of yourself, you know. And it's in the 5th house, which is the house that Leo traditionally rules, which is all about that self-expression and creativity. So again, it makes sense that he found his way to connect through acting, through being funny, charismatic, but then deep inside he had this darkness, right? So the other thing too, so his North Node in Pisces means that he has his South Node in Virgo in the 2nd house in this chart. And when you have a South Node in Virgo in general, you're overly hard on yourself. You're overly critical and judgmental of yourself. And it also pours into your relationships with others. So it makes it really hard to see yourself as a whole person, or be kind to yourself. So nothing ever feels good enough, essentially. And he's got Pluto there, which means that there's a little bit of an affliction when it comes to his self-worth. But, you know, it also means he has these inherent gifts when it comes to manifesting certain things into his life for himself, which we obviously see through the luck of his, you know, career. And still today, right? He's cheated death so many times. And so he does kind of have this, you know, point of ease in his chart a little bit here that's helping him. There was one other thing that I was going to suggest before I wrap this up. And I think it had to do with his Leo placement, but I can't remember what I was going to share. So I think I'm going to end it there. But yeah, so that's kind of a look into some of the placements that he had that might have made him more prone to addiction. Again, you can have these placements and not necessarily end up an alcoholic. It just, I think, has a lot to do with how things were cultivated in you as a child, right? So maybe if he was taught how to like reach certain states within his mind through meditation, and he had a spiritual practice, it might not have developed into alcoholism. You know, he might have been able to recreationally do those things without it turning into that. But I think if he didn't have that accessible to him, it's more likely that somebody might end up in that state. So yeah, sorry I couldn't make the live, and I hope that you enjoyed this brief assessment of Matthew Perry's birth chart.
Thank you, Annalisa, for sharing that with us. We really appreciate when you show us what the stars say, especially when it's about the stars. Well, let's play some Friends trivia and see if Sarah can hold her reign. I'm just going to randomly take a picture here. Oh, I don't know. Nobody will know that one. Which basketball team do Ross, Joey, and Chandler support?
Knicks.
That is correct.
Oh, I was going to say that. I could have needed to open my mouth.
Monica gets a job creating recipes using a fake chocolate product that goes by which name? Mockolet.
That sounds horrible.
Okay. Which of Ross's girlfriends does he first meet at Monica and Chandler's wedding?
Mona?
That is correct. I told you guys, Sarah's really good at this game.
I don't know if that's something to be proud of, but I watch a lot of TV.
All right, let me ask one more. After Monica gets stung by a jellyfish, who pees on her to help remove the pain?
Chandler.
Chandler.
Yay, Chandler Bing.
Such a great episode.
Right?
Such a great episode. And I just want to let you know, ladies, that if we were at the beach and you got stung, I would pee on you. If you needed me to, I would pee on you.
Aw. You're a good friend, Elise.
Get back at
You know, taking one for the team. That's just what I do. Well, you know, I had reached out to Matthew Perry via DM on Instagram to invite him to this Sober Curator Roundup. And clearly he's been too busy this week to check his DMs because I have not yet gotten a response. But Matthew, you're sober and single. I'm sober and single. You love tennis and pickleball. If you look up my senior picture in my senior book, it says that my goal in life is to become a professional pickleball player. Pickleball is from the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live. I also love views. I've seen every episode of Friends at least 3 times. So call me. Love you. Loved the book. So as we wrap up here, I loved the book. I will probably read it in its book form and highlight a few things. It's entirely possible I'll even listen to the Audible again. So I give 2 thumbs up. How do the rest of you feel about it?
Yeah, I read it or listened to it in one weekend. It was that good. I was traveling that weekend, but it was just entertaining and warm. I felt like it was warm.
I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I just, the way he carried on and pushed through, right? And he showed up. I mean, that's what a lot of alcoholic addicts are like. I mean, we're go-getters, right? We're amazing people. We just need to hold on to this, life and recovery. So it's I always find it really fascinating to hear about people's journeys and stories.
I plan to listen to it over the next week, so. But I thought the interview was 2 thumbs up. I did. Anytime we can talk about addiction and I think it helps reduce the stigma. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's great to have this narrative out there. People need to know and understand. And I think just the more people that can bring light to it is great. I am happy that he spoke positively about AA. We don't always hear that. And I hope that, he's able to get this thing, because this thing is pretty damn awesome.
It is. And I will say the fact that he just doesn't give up and keeps trying, right? That's half the battle right there. All right. Well, does anybody have a favorite Chandler Bing memory or episode that you want to mention as we close out?
You know what? I really like the one where him and Monica are having a bath together and nobody knows yet that they're together.
Mm-hmm.
I just like the chemistry that those two had on the show. So fun. Like that. It makes me laugh every time when he dunks under the water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
There's a few episodes where they're hiding it. And
yeah.
I think one of my all-time favorite episodes is when Joey, the whole conversation where it all comes out and everybody realizes, like, almost everybody knew except Ross, right?
Yeah, because Ross is the last one to find out, I think. Yeah, right. Pretty sure.
I thought it was so interesting. He said that, I mean, I didn't remember the Emmys, but he was sober for season 9, and that's when he got nominated. And I think that's like the beginning of their marriage.
Yep.
I always loved him as his silliness growing up, but I think maybe because I'd grown up a lot at that point, I really appreciated him, sort of the sense that he was, landing into a loving relationship with Monica.
Well, and I remember, he talks about the fact that the day that they filmed the wedding scene, he was driven in from a treatment center, which is just, definitely not what I was thinking when I watched that episode about what was actually happening in his life behind the scenes, and how, I mean, that's just proof of what a great actor he really is, right? Because he suited up and showed up despite all the things that were going on behind the scenes, and still gave us the storylines that we loved. I mean, Friends is such a big part of pop culture. It was a big part. I mean, I was definitely watching it and drinking, to be clear, but like, it's just, it's a big chunk of my youth. And it was something that I've been able to share with my son and his friend. My son's best friend, McCabe, loves Friends. So we have literally probably seen every episode a couple of times together. And that was something that the humor of it And the innocence of that show is something that I love, that I could share with my son and his friends. And I hope, I think it's the kind of show that will be around and kind of stand throughout the test of time. All right. Well, thank you all for coming today, and we will see you next time.